go into our year of renovations, we hope that all of you will keep supporting the Carlisle Theater, keep those donations rolling in, because without patrons, we couldn't do all of the wonderful shows that we love to do here at the theater. So sit back, relax, and enjoy our show, Stories of Seasons. Good evening, and welcome to Stories of Seasons. I am your host, Tara Sollman, and it is my absolute honor to welcome you into something truly special. Over the past 5 months, 11 people from this community did something quietly courageous. They walked into a little room here at this very theater, a room we call the Collective, and they made themselves vulnerable. They dug into their memories, their wounds, and their triumphs, and their most human moments. And they shaped them into the stories that you all are about to hear. Early on in our workshop, one of our cast members told us about an advertisement he remembered seeing a long time ago at a bar. And it was reverberating in his mind throughout this process, and he shared it with us. It was a Mike's Hard Lemonade ad that he saw hanging in that bar. In bold letters it said, "Just because it happened to you doesn't make it interesting." Yeah. It's okay to groan. We all groaned too, and we laughed, and we were like, wow, that stings. And I share that with you tonight because that's what we're all up against. We live in an age that has made us deeply insecure about our own narratives. Social media rewards the extraordinary, algorithms favor the viral, and somewhere along the way, most of us just quietly decide that our stories aren't interesting enough to share. And I'm here tonight to tell you that that is a lie. Humans have been gathering around fires and telling their stories for more than 400,000 years, not just for warmth, but to make sense of the world together. They told each other, "This happened to me. Does it sound familiar to you?" And so tonight, we're going to do something ancient. We're going to gather around the fire, some magic there, for some storytelling. 11 humans getting completely, uncomfortably, and beautifully honest. To start us off, here to take us on a maddening journey that frankly left me in disbelief, with her story Scammed, please welcome Holly Smith.
Have you ever just driven down the road, merged safely onto the highway, opened your mouth, and screamed? That's what I was doing in March 2011 on the Pennsylvania Turnpike heading east. For 20 miles, I screamed, tears streaming down my face until I was hoarse and gasping. I had just spent the last 4 days with my mom, and I was heading home to Carlisle. I usually don't run screaming from my mother's house, but we get along pretty well. But that's the story. See, my mom was Boston-born, tall, blonde, and beautiful, dignified. Her name could have been reserved or private. Don't air your dirty laundry. Everything is fine. She was whip smart, commonsensical, decisive, and directive. Physically and emotionally strong and fit. She was cultured and enjoyed things like the symphony and the opera and the ballet. She wasn't that open to people, yet loved to connect and would get kind of weird with strangers sometimes, kind of flirty. When she laughed, it was loud and big. You could see her molars. She was complicated. She was a dental hygienist for most of her working life, And between that and quilting and playing tennis, her handshake could crack your metacarpals. She was outdoorsy and loved hiking to the tops of mountains. She actually hugged trees. I have a picture. When she was 67, she backpacked for the first time down into the Grand Canyon in Arizona and wore a shit-eating grin for 5 miles. You know, until our knees started to hurt. That's my mom. So that day in March 2011, I had just spent those last few days with her trying to put out a dumpster fire. My very reliable, super smart mom, over the previous 9 months, had been sending money to Jamaica and other places too, but mostly Jamaica. Lots of money. And we don't know anybody in Jamaica. When she ran out of ready cash, she borrowed money from her longtime partner, being all evasive about what the money was for. After about $25,000 of that, he slapped himself in the forehead and blew the whistle on her. Then he called to tell me all this, and it felt like ice was pouring down my spine. Impossible. No way, not her. She is way too smart for that. So I had to go, and I had to stop her and find out what was going on. She lived 3 hours away in my childhood home outside of Pittsburgh. While I was driving into the hurricane, she called me and she demanded that I get $1,800 in cash. She said her lottery winnings were in an armored truck in Harrisburg, and she needed to pay the money to get the armored truck released. Then she could get these people out of her life. She was frantic. A couple of things flashed in my mind. First, could I get $1,800 cash? Second, my mother was in a panic, and I had never seen my mother anywhere near panic. Third, armored truck in Harrisburg. That's close to where I live. Whoever she's dealing with, she's been confiding in them. These people knew things. She shared information about my family and her grandchildren with scammers. I had to pull over. I said, okay, and then I hung up. Then I called our friend and financial manager, and I said, what am I supposed to do? She's usually right about everything. Should I just give her the money? Could there actually be a truck full of money in Harrisburg? Oh. So he suggested I call for backup. He said, call the police and have them meet me and drive to her house together. I said, that sounds great. I called her local police and told them my mom was mixed up with scammers, and would they please come to her house with me? And I arranged to meet an officer a few miles from her house, and they followed me from there. As we pulled down her street, she was pacing up and down the front steps of her house. When she saw the police car, she threw her hands in the air and stormed into the house. My whole body was shaking as I reached for the front door, and the officer and I stepped inside. She was stomping around the house, arms flying around, and she was yelling, "You're ruining everything. Why did you call the police? This is never going to be over." She was raging at me. I realized at this moment, I didn't know this person. She was a complete stranger. The officer said something like, "Ma'am, it appears you're being scammed." And she said, "You don't know anything. Now you've done it." And then she stopped. She walked into the living room, flopped onto the sofa, picked up an old battered TV tray that she used all the time and dropped it in her lap. And then she picked up a deck of cards and started dealing out solitaire. My mouth dropped open. What just happened? Flashes of my grandmother flew past. That's her mother. My grandmother played this all the time. I looked at the officer. He was wearing the same holy crap expression that I was. And we stared at her for a few minutes. And then he shipped it, and I thought, oh God, don't leave. Don't leave me with her. I don't know who I'm dealing with here. He said, "I guess I'll go. I recommend you file a report at the station." The following days were a nightmare circus from hell and international bank fraud. Jamaican scammers calling, promising enticing winnings and demanding money and hanging up and calling again. I won a new car and $2 million. But I had to send taxes and fees. They were being way too familiar with me and making it sound like they knew my mom really well. Sometimes they were angry and threatening. I'd hang up on them and the phone would ring again. New story, new setup, more persuasion, more intimidation. They were relentless. Every 10 minutes the phone was ringing. If this was how my mother spent the last 9 months, no wonder she was gone. The most persistent and effective scammer called himself Omar. Apparently, he and my mother had become friends. She trusted him. He claimed to be an FBI agent working undercover in Jamaica and, get this, helping her get the money back that she was scammed out of. And she was bankrolling him. Amazingly, I found a guardianship attorney who got it right away. He started the process on his end for placing her under financial guardianship, while I triaged the front lines. He told me, build a moat around her, cut her off from the scammers. I said, that works, that clicked, I could do that. 2 days after arriving at her house, I sat at the desk of the manager of the bank that my mom dealt with for 30 years. And I had a new power of attorney in my hand, and they could talk to me now. The bank manager smiled at me sadly, and then started describing the colossal financial mess my mother was in. CDs were closed with penalties. Bonds were cashed out early. She made dozens of ATM withdrawals and wire transfers, all with fees. She had depleted all of the accounts at that bank, so lines of credits were opened and payments were overdue. Checks were bounced. I went ice cold again. It was like wading into a frozen lake. In the meantime, my mom is sitting next to me, fidgeting, which was unusual for her. She was usually very calm. Then she jumped up and demanded my cell phone. Without thinking, I handed it to her. The bank woman kept talking, but that cold lake water, it was up over my head by now. Her words were all wonky, like the parents in the Charlie Brown cartoons. But I could hear my mom behind me talking very loudly into my phone. Omar! She was articulating like the connection was bad. Omar, my daughter changed my number. Write this down. This is my new phone number. She recited her new phone number to the scammer. I turned and looked at her. She was hunched over my phone, holding the paper with her new phone number, and I'm thinking, what happened to the moat? She's giving Omar her new number so he could keep calling her and persuading her to send money. I turned back to the bank manager, and she was just staring at me. And then in that moment, I knew I was in the twilight zone. So this became our new normal. My mom broke through the moat a few more times over the next few months. Like she'd snag her pension check from her brand new bank account at a brand new bank and send the cash via FedEx to some envelope to some dude in Ohio. Damn it, there she goes again. Omar and his many, many friends used amazing ingenuity to try to reach her. Each time I repaired the damage, shut down the communication, and got smarter. There were more trips to Pittsburgh and lots of highway screaming. She was finally placed under financial guardianship, which means she was declared financially incompetent in a courtroom. My private, brilliant mother, financially incompetent. And I had to testify. Sitting in front of her and strangers, telling the story of how scammers convinced her to send them her hard-earned wealth, her legacy to her grandchildren. It was one of the worst moments of my life. So during the messy cleanup, I called every acronym I could think of: FTC, FBI, DHS, US Postal Inspector, victim specialist. I had all the intel: phone numbers, names, addresses, accounts, transactions, everything. Finally, about 8 months later, a real FBI agent took the case, and about 8 or 10 of these guys ended up in prison. To this day, I still get updates from the DOJ about these people. But I still couldn't figure out what really happened to her until I connected with a fraud expert who was writing a book about this exact thing. Go figure. He explained it wasn't her fault. She didn't give the money away. Scammers' tactics are extremely strategic and effective. They literally rewired her brain. They capitalized on her intelligence. They purposefully kept her in a state of high stress, agitation, and panic for 10 months. She was truly a victim. So we worked hard, my family, her partner, and his family, to bring her back to herself, to reform her dignity and humor. We circled the wagons around her and reminded her that she was important and smart. It took years. My mom passed in 2020, never quite fully regaining that full spark, but she knew we loved her, regardless of what she did. And that was the most important thing. Thank you.
Next up, we hear from a storyteller who learned that leadership doesn't wait until you're ready. With her story, Fish Out of Water, please give a warm welcome to our director, Chris Kapp.
I was 22 years old the first time that I became the boss. 6 days after I turned 22 years old, I found myself driving a mostly empty U-Haul with a betta fish in an old gallon jug and my 12-year-old 115-pound Newfie dog riding shotgun away from Manhattan to a little town called Waterville, Maine. I had no idea what to expect, but I was determined that I was going to fake it until I made it. I was driving that mostly empty U-Haul from New York City to Maine with my giant ancient dog and the fish in the milk jug to take up a position as the Assistant Executive Director for the Waterville chapter of a major Christian international nonprofit. Oh, and on top of running all their social services programs, I was also going to take up my first preaching gig as the pastor of their local congregation. No sweat, right? Now, this was before the days of GPS, so I had something called my AAA triptych sitting on the bench seat with me. It was sitting there with me, and the map, and the fish, and the dog, until somewhere in Massachusetts, when that fish jug just exploded. I have no idea what happened, but I was soaking wet, the map was soaking wet, and apparently it now smelled delicious because my idiot dog, who usually moved about the same speed as a slug, dove in and started chewing. He ate my map. I couldn't even get pulled over, and it was gone. I put the truck in park on the side of the road, and I ran around to the passenger door so I could try to save the fish, who was now flopping around on the floor of the U-Haul, gasping for air. Water? Anyway, I scooped him up into my half-full Nalgene water bottle, looked at what was left of my map, and burst into tears. I had never driven north of the Bronx, much less to Maine. And I was so screwed. And then I saw the red and blue lights behind the moving truck. I cried harder. I was still standing outside the truck with the passenger door open, holding the water bottle with the fish in it, when the cop got out of his car and walked up towards me. He asked me if I was okay, if I needed help. And I think I lost my mind because before I could even stop myself, I looked at him with big eyes and blurted out, "The fish jug exploded and the dog ate my map and I can't find Maine and I have no idea what I'm doing and I'm supposed to be the boss and I can't even get there one piece and I am so not ready for this. I have only been 22 for 6 days." That poor cop. He looked at me, the fish, the dog, the U-Haul, and shook his head. He told me it was gonna be okay. He handed me a packet of tissues, he handed me a new map that he had highlighted the little road to Waterville, Maine, and sent me on my way. Later that day, I pulled up in front of the building that would be my new church, my new office, and my new apartment for the first time. It was an old funeral home. There it is. I stood there holding the fish in the water bottle in one hand, the dog leash in the other, staring at this absolutely decrepit old building, when a woman who I swear could have been alive for the Lincoln administration flung the door open and yells, "Hiya, Kathy!" I froze. And I thought to myself, okay, it can only go up from here. In the next 24 hours, I managed to move my few belongings into my new home. I met my staff. The ancient one-woman welcoming committee was, in fact, the head of our social services department, and had been for the last 63 years, give or take about a decade. My assistant was a 15-year-old kid who needed community service hours. And the couple who ran the thrift store across the parking lot came in dressed like they maybe hadn't changed their clothes since Woodstock. On my first official Sunday as an ordained minister, the entire congregation showed up. All 14 of them, along with the 3 dogs who dutifully followed their owners into the pews like they came to church every Sunday. And let me tell you, as a brand new baby minister, there was nothing more intimidating than that tiny little congregation. Especially the 6 portly old church ladies who crammed themselves into a single pew right in the front row, where I guess they thought they could keep an eye on the new kid. They just kind of stared at me. I started the service and everything seemed to be going well right until the middle of my first sermon, when that packed pew full of church ladies started to crack, and then it hit the ground with all 6 church ladies going everywhere. I froze. But then I looked around at all of it. The ladies on the floor, the dogs barking, the old men trying to scrape them up, and I couldn't help myself. I tried to hold it in, but I snickered. And then I might have snorted. And as much as I tried, I just couldn't stop the laughter. And then I was crying again. The total absurdity of the past 48 hours had just been too much. I laughed because in that moment I was fully aware that I didn't know what the hell I was doing, but I was gonna do my best to lead them anyway. That church service disintegrated like the pew that morning. We were done. But after making sure everybody was all right, the 15 of us and the dogs sat around some tables in the fellowship hall together, drinking coffee and getting to know each other. And I remember telling them that, yeah, I may only be 22 years old. And yeah, I may be a brand new minister, and I definitely didn't know what I was doing yet. But what I did know is that if we all worked together, we could create something really meaningful together as a group. And for the next 2 years, until I left that assignment, that is exactly what we did. Thank you.
Our next storyteller invites us tonight to examine the stories we tell ourselves. With his story titled, The BS, please welcome to the stage Brent Dickerson.
Sitting in the room that I grew up in on a warm, soft daybed, hanging behind me was a real-life Confederate flag. I lived in the Bay Area, Fremont, California, but I was born in Tennessee, and I thought I was a rebel. Little did I know what that symbol means to many people. It was about the Dukes of Hazzard and being a rebel, right? A few years earlier, I remember the hot tears running down my face at the Boy Scouts of America National Jamboree as Lee Greenwood sang, "I'm proud to be an American." The feeling of pride, heightened emotions, and power was like answering the altar call at the hypest church you've ever been to. And I just knew I was on the right path. I had a great childhood. I attended church, played team sports, excelled at school, was almost the youngest Eagle Scout, dated the head cheerleader, and had lots of friends. At that time in my life, I was thinking that, wow, I'm doing all the things I'm supposed to and it's working out great. Saying this and participating in some narrative therapy at times has helped me realize that that great might be a little more subjective than I want to admit. At these points in my life, I didn't question the things I was being taught, and I was able to recite them as if they were my own knowledge and own experience. My growing up years were what I would consider to be all-American. I trusted all my elders at church, school, scouts, my heroes like Christopher Columbus, George Washington, Lord Baden-Powell. My trust for these teachings and belief systems, BS, was cracked starting in high school and then was later fully cracked open during an experience I had in college. The unlearnings and decolonizations of my mind continue to unravel the fabric of all my BS. That's belief systems. One of the first cracks in my BS was in high school my junior year when a new student and I became close friends and started hanging out more and at his house a bit. In comparison to my house, which was inviting, his house always had the smell of cooked rice and always had music, and a mom and siblings that didn't get into my business. My friend and I were both football players. We worked out together and drove around a lot, listening to a lot of reggae and in taking some of that devil's lettuce. Funny to think how the devil's lettuce helped me understand that the reggae that we were listening to was many times more spiritual and holy than some of the hymns I was singing on Sunday and the Christian rock anthems that I was singing in Sunday night youth group. Another crack in the BS around this time was having my first sexual experiences. And I also started questioning my sexuality because Billy Idol was super hot, as well as the other folks in his videos. This is something that I never discussed with my parents. While taking classes at a local junior college, thinking of going into law, I realized my family had no means of paying for a 4-year college, and I decided to join the Army for the GI Bill. My parents had to co-sign with me at that time because I was still 17. I picked chemical operations specialist because it was giving the max amount for college. I did basic training in August in Northeast Alabama. The humidity was like running through clear mayonnaise. I excelled in leadership, getting in trouble for fighting, and running. So much that my mom didn't recognize me at graduation. I was first stationed in Germany at 18, and another crack in the BS appeared when I was told that the drinking age in Germany was 18. My counterparts stationed in the US would still not be able to drink alcohol, even though they signed the same blank check with their life to the US Army. I made great friends at this point in my life. And being away from home, I was starting to think my own thoughts. I met a Muslim that convinced me to go vegetarian, and I quickly adopted a vegetarian lifestyle. And I made more friends, gay folks, leftist folks, conspiracy theorists. Many of them were there for the same reason that I was. This time in Germany opened my eyes to the fact that some things I had been taught and the BS that was part of me might not be the whole truth. After Germany, I was stationed in Alabama. Yes, the same humid walking through Mayo Place. And the cracks started to build. I was still being a good soldier, participating in Soldier of the Month, Quarter, and competitions because I could remember the weight and muzzle velocity of an M16A2 and how to give commands in formation. My dress shoes and buttons were highly shined, and I could spin perfectly in an about face. And the soft click of my heels in those quiet rooms was just audible enough. At the same time, the base I was on was closing, and I saw the town around the base slowly dying. Stores closing, auto dealerships moving out, clubs and bars being abandoned. And a big crack came when I was put in charge of a detail to clean up lots of excess materials to prepare the base to close. We threw away perfectly functional vacuum cleaners, windows, wall lockers, just pitched them into huge dumpsters. Anything that had a serial number. Just clang, boom, next. All the while, the town around us could have used any of these items. With all that, I had been taught about waste and giving to those in need. I was feeling betrayed, sad, enraged, all at the same time. I had the chance to re-enlist and go to school to become an officer, but at this time, I just wanted to chill out a bit, maybe with some of the devil's lettuce. And I left the Army in August of '99, and I chose to check out Humboldt State University in Northern California because in the time of Steve Irwin, I wanted to be a wildlife conservation specialist. Through history, sociology, linguistics courses, I learned that much of the mythos of our nation was just that. From learning that Columbus may have never have seen the US as we know it, and that there were in fact people living here peacefully before our arrival, to giving the gift of smallpox-ridden blankets to indigenous peoples, sitting in the front row staring at my professor who was just wearing jeans and a t-shirt, I started to fight back with my own mind and knowledge, but I was also reading voraciously, and the readings and the new teachings seemed to line up a lot more accurately than my preconceived ideas and my BS. It is also around this time I started reading Robert Anton Wilson, who was a big proponent of unlearning and finding new ways to learn. At this time, I started writing all of my college papers in E-prime English. That's English without any conjugation of the verb to be. For example, the grass is green translates to the grass appears green to me. This changed my life. At that time, I was living with a group of 4 other dudes that were becoming close, hanging out, playing music, listening to music, playing disc golf in the redwoods, and generally being open to life. I do remember doing a lot of dishes and the constant smell of the ancient forest mixed with unshowered dudes, and the unmistakable skunky scent of Humboldt County's cash crop. The event that changed me forever, that final crack in the BS, was a camping trip I took with all of these close friends. We went up to a beach near Trinidad, California, where the redwoods and Pacific Ocean can be touched at the same time. And I remember standing on the beach and looking into the forested coastline and wondering if I was living in a dream. We partied all night one night, and in a cove while the moon was high overhead, we all found places in the cove. One high up on a cliff, one on the beach, two sitting on a driftwood log, and one closer to the redwood's curtain's edge. All sitting quietly. And slowly, one of us started drumming. Still not sure who, and it didn't matter, because moments later, more of us joined in. There was no song we were playing. The physical vibrations, as well as the sounds, seemed to be coming from all of us and none of us. There was an electric feeling, almost like goosebumps, but wrapped in a warm blanket without those creepy neck ones. And in this moment, I felt like I was being held by the universe. The feeling of awe, like when you see something amazing, that initial gasp. It was sustained in a way that I can only describe as oneness. This crack is something that not only laid my heart bare, but also opened areas that may still be in need of filling. I felt and was open to everything, everywhere, all at once, and had the feeling it had already lasted forever, would last forever, and could also have been the fraction of a blink. This oneness is something that I continually look for in all things, and I believe the only BS that I can truly hang on to. Thank you.
Next, we will hear from a storyteller who learns in the most unexpected of places what it feels like to finally fit. With their story, Soul Matters, please give a warm welcome to Phoenix Bell Shelton.
When I was a kid, there wasn't much I got to choose. I didn't get to choose how I moved without being noticed. I didn't get to choose how I talked without being corrected. I didn't get to choose how loud I could laugh before someone decided it was too much. So I learned to read the room. I could feel a mood shift before it happened. I knew when a voice got tight. I got very good at making myself smaller. I knew when I was about to become the punchline. So, yeah, there weren't many things that I got to choose, except my shoes. Every morning, I'd sit on the edge of my bed with the light streaming through my window. My socks still smelled like laundry detergent. I would lace up my shoes slowly, tight, listening to that soft zip of the laces. It was a small ritual that belonged just to me. Once the shoes were on, I felt steadier, not brave, just steadier, like I had something solid under me before I walked into the hallways and classrooms and locker rooms where eyes lingered a little too long and the insults landed a little too close to my heart. So I guess shoes became my armor, not joy, just survival. They were something that people would notice about me that wouldn't get me hurt. So I leaned into my shoes, Vans in every color, high-top Converse, Nikes, and Air Jordans, even though I didn't care one bit about basketball at all. But if people were going to look at me, I wanted them to look at my shoes. They didn't stop the bullies, but they helped. My shoes gave me something firm to stand on when, well, everything else felt shaky. Somewhere along the way, I guess I grew up. The bullying faded, I came out as non-binary. I found people who loved me without asking me to shrink. And along the way, I started telling myself I didn't need my shoe armor anymore. I was practical now, respectable, past all of that, mature. I thought being safe in my body was the same thing as being truly comfortable in it. I told myself not needing my shoe armor anymore was the same thing as being true to myself. Years later, I walked into Target. Toothpaste, a water bottle, and new khakis. That was the shopping list. The lights were too bright. The red carts rattled across the tile. There was this low hum in the air that somehow made me anxious and bored at the same time. I wasn't looking for anything meaningful, just toothbrush, khakis, and a new water bottle. It was another one of those boring, responsible adult chores that had to be done. And then I saw them. I almost reacted involuntarily when I saw a pair of shiny-heeled boots. I felt that familiar tight pull in the center of my chest. I walked away. Then I turned around and picked them up. They were cool and shiny and sparkled in the light. Then I checked the size. 11. My size. And so, the next thing I know, I'm sitting on one of those tiny benches in the shoe aisle. The tissue paper crinkled. My heart was pounding in my ears. I slid my foot in. They fit. And I cried. Not loud, not dramatic, just tears. I sat there between the socks and the clearance signs, and suddenly I realized it wasn't about the shoes. I wasn't asking myself, do I like these? I was asking myself, why does this feel so big? Why does it matter that they fit? That I liked how I looked in them. That when I stood up, I felt taller, steadier, more at home in my body than I had in a long time. And then those memories came rushing back. The kid, the armor. And I realized something beautiful. These shoes weren't armor. They were joy. So I bought them. I carried the bag out to my car and just sat there for a minute, trying to understand what happened. Later that night, I took them out of the box again. I put them on and walked across my living room floor. Nothing dramatic happened. No music came from the heavens. No lights came either. But something inside me settled, and I found myself exhaling. Exhaling a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding on to for years. My shoe collection has only grown since then. I still have Vans and Converse, but now there are sparkly heels in the closet too, and some stilettos, and these gorgeous red knee-high boots that make a noise when I walk and announce that I am here, that I am unapologetically me. People still look at my shoes. And sometimes, even now, people would prefer that I shrink, or at least some may. But there are moments where I wonder if all of the comments and stares are worth it. But I don't use my shoes as armor anymore. Now they're an expression of my joy, my refusal to shrink for anyone. Shoes don't fix everything, but they remind me of something every time I put them on, that I choose joy and not just survival. And sometimes healing looks like crying in Target because something inside of you finally fits. Thank you.
Our next storyteller just happens to be my husband. And he knows that the greatest stories ever told are the ones that love writes. With his story, Requiem Interrupted, please welcome Rick Sollman.
If you've never heard a death rattle, it's an unsettling sound. Well, of course it is. It's not that profound. It's right in the name, but it happens when a dying patient cannot swallow saliva and mucus, which builds up in their throat. And I endured the wet clicking echoing throughout the comfort care room. The patient I was listening to was my father on a Sunday, actually Father's Day 2022. I tapped on my MacBook, writing his obituary. I wasn't expecting to be here just 48 hours earlier. Rich found Gail, his soulmate, in 1972, and they married in 1974. My parents had always had a kiss or hug for each other and for us. Both retired teachers. I can't buy it, honestly. In retirement, my mom leaned into quilting. My dad, a man of many talents, Rich loved to fish and always kept what he caught, was active in the Erie Bridge Club and sang bass for many years in the Presque Isle Chorale. But really, they always spent time together, going out to eat, traveling, or just staying home to watch Survivor or Family Feud. We'd visit, and they'd come and see us. My dad smiled with his whole face, like you're supposed to, genuinely. We all felt the warmth when he was surrounded by family. Rich became a doting opa to his grandkids, sharing hugs, playing games, and cultivating a love for nature. He was on his way to play bridge when my mom texted me that a delivery truck turned into my dad's lane, striking his minivan head-on. Crumpled, totaled, all of the airbags hung limply. and he walked away from it. Dad FaceTimed us later that night and lifted his shirt. An angry, deep crimson bruise made the exact shape of the seatbelt. Dad's effortless smile convinced us he was sore, but okay. I was relieved, still a little concerned, but definitely not expecting the phone call I would get that Saturday morning. I woke up to my phone vibrating on my nightstand at about 5 a.m. Groggily, I looked at the caller ID and snapped awake as soon as I saw it was my mom. Her determined voice, fighting off tears, told me, "Your dad is in the hospital. He's not going to make it. I think you should come to say goodbye." What? How? Dad had collapsed the night before, disoriented. Mom called 911, and as they were on their way to the hospital, he became completely unresponsive. The neurosurgeon said Dad would never recover. A massive amount of blood had built up in his head. The small rupture was completely undetected in initial scans. Dark blood was all you could see on the CT scan 60 hours later. All the doctors agreed he had less than a 2% chance of ever regaining consciousness. He would never have his full brain function back. Mom wanted to keep him on life support until my sister and I got there. But after that, I drove up to Erie. I only remember getting there. I hugged my mom, who met me in the ICU first, both of us silently sobbing, while Dad's breaths labored in mechanical intervals. I gave him a hug there in the ICU, avoiding the respirator. I told him how much I loved him and what he meant to me, and eventually my sister got there and did the same. We could feel his body, but the diagnosis was undeniable. Leaving him like this felt cruel. Couldn't let him go, but had to. So the staff sent us to another room and removed all the tubes. We didn't expect to have a lot of time with him, so we all stayed with him. But he held on all day. I eventually insisted that my mom go home. She'd been up for over 36 hours straight. I was alone with Dad then, and sounded like a moan escaped his lips. Sounded like pain. But the doctor's statement that he would never have his full brain function back echoes in my ears in response. And with every movement of his lips, every twitch, I remembered the scan, the black mass crowding out his brain, and the doctors. The doctors assured me this was all normal and involuntary. So he held on and made it to Sunday, Father's Day. He was in comfort care since he no longer needed intensive care. The death rattle, loud, imposing. So I needed a distraction. I put on something Dad would watch at home, Celebrity Family Feud. But after the third or fourth time Steve Harvey mugged when someone said but or would, I decided I wanted to spend my time remembering my dad, and that's when I got out my MacBook and started typing. It was sad, but really cathartic. So he continued to hold on. One day turned into 2, 3. My mom, sister, and I took turns being there with him, and contrary to what we were told to expect, he was always warm to the touch. I didn't think much of it until the Tuesday after Father's Day. I was with Dad when the doctor pulled his left eye open to look in with a flashlight. In response, both of my dad's eyes popped open. he angrily furrowed his brow, and his blue eyes with a fire I never thought I'd see again. And the doctor said, "Sorry," and backed away. Dad looked at both me and my mom, and I almost thought I saw a smile, but he laid back down, unresponsive, like nothing had ever happened. Mom and I talked to him for a bit. Do you need anything? Are you okay? We're here with you. It's okay. We love you. Nothing. And then his breathing got lighter, shallow, no more death rattle, but a fading whisper. And about an hour later, my mom leaned in to kiss his cheek and leave for the night. My dad pursed his lips. Was this the final goodbye? The rally before he passed on? I sent my exhausted mom home, but I was still processing these confusing developments, and then it happened. Dad fully opened his eyes, looked at me, and said, "I'm thirsty." I got out my phone and asked him to say it again. I took a video of him giving an impassioned plea that he was very, 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 very thirsty. I ran down to the nurse's station, showed them the video, and demanding that a doctor come and see him right away. He did not sound like a dying man. He was able to swallow the water we gave him. He was muttering. He was talking. That obituary was a distant memory by morning. By then, Dad was even trying to get out of bed. He was no longer in comfort care. He was in recovery. The neurologist's theory, taking him off life support brought him back. It allowed his tissues to shrink, the blood to naturally clot when the blood thinners he was on cleared out. He would need surgery and rehab, but he was back. Emotionally, I was grieving for days, and then I'm planning a recovery. On top of that, every time he woke up, he didn't remember anything about the hospital or the accident. I can't imagine the confusion of waking up with all these tubes in your body. I told him dozens of times that he had been in an accident. He thought he was on his way to a big bridge tournament in State College. I had to remind him that he was injured every time that he woke up. But he knew us. He loved us. And that cut through the confusion every time. Dad's sister visited. He called his brother. He was just happy to chat. It was almost normal sometimes. And my mom, she had her soulmate back. Many more years of happy retirement. The pain of that previous week refocused to planning surgery and rehab. But it's honestly a bit of a blur what happened the rest of that week, because I know exactly what happened 4 days later. I was with him that day. It was exactly 1 week after Father's Day. The nurse's assistant came in to wash him up, and as they were moving him on the bed, the nurse, suddenly alert, exclaimed, "Sir, sir!" And alarms started going off everywhere. A nurse ushered me to a spot out of the way. It felt like the entire hospital converged on his room. Dad had flatlined, completely unresponsive. I met my mom in the lobby. She was already on her way when this happened. I had to tell her right there and usher her up to the OR. Getting the blood thinners out of his system brought him back, but it also made him vulnerable. Every resuscitation took longer till we had to let go for good. I'm thankful that my mom wasn't alone. It's painful to lose my dad, but truthfully, the stunned, sorrowful look in my mom's eyes is what still crushes me today. Together, we told him we loved him, and I know he hurt us. He fought to come back, and we got to be with him and love him for another week due to his sheer stubbornness and determination. I retrieved the obituary I wrote a week earlier. And the truth was published that week. A true family man, Rich will be remembered for how much he loved being with the people he loved and making sure they were happy. He will be enormously missed by those who were lucky to love him. We love you, Rich. We love you, Dad. We love you, Opa. I love you, Mom. Thank you.
We will now take a 10-minute intermission. The concessions and the bar will be open. And there are tissues on either side of the stage. You will need one. Thank you. I can't wait for you to meet our next storyteller, who spent years carefully tending to the distance between who the world thought he was and who he actually knew himself to be. With his story, Happily Ever After, please welcome Dave Shaver.
I'm a Disney gay. No, seriously. I mean, I love Disney, but I really am a Disney gay. I came out to my mom at Walt Disney World. We'll come back to that, though. I grew up in a Christian home. I knew I was gay probably in elementary school, but didn't know what it was called. When I was a teenager, I realized what gay meant and that it did not fit in with what my church taught me. I didn't want to be gay, so I did whatever I thought might help in my de-gayification. I prayed. I read books. I went to therapy. Others prayed with me for my unspoken prayer requests. I went to seminars to help me be a better Christian. And finally, at the end of all that, still gay. Eventually, I started questioning what I believed about being gay. I was taught it was a sin. I was taught that you love the sinner but hate the sin. But I was also taught that God is love and loved people unconditionally. I wondered, if God is so loving, why would they create me with these feelings but not take them away from me when I asked? If that's the case, if God didn't want me to be gay, but wouldn't change me and expected me to live without love, then God was an asshole. I didn't believe God was an asshole. I believe God is loving, so they must have made me the way I am and must be just fine with it. I was just fine with who I was too. But coming out, that was a whole other issue. It terrified me. I'd be blowing up my whole life. My closest friends, my family, my position as a worship leader, all related to church. I'd potentially be throwing all that away. I knew my family and friends loved me. I hoped, based on their character, they'd accept me. For me, the closet was a psychological prison. I hoped things would be okay. I had an overwhelming fear that they would not. And that became my truth. Hope just wasn't enough to unlock the closet door for me. But then I met him. I'm not talking about Mickey Mouse. His name was Harish, and we met online. He was from India and was here to get his PhD, and in 4 or 5 years would go back to India, where he would be expected to have an arranged marriage and live his life. And me, I was resigned to eventually getting married to a woman and trying to fake it and make it work. This future felt inevitable. We were very casual at first, but I fell for him pretty quickly. After a few months, I found myself thinking about him all the time. I missed him when we weren't together. I felt tingly when I saw him or when we talked. I got sad when he couldn't text me back because he was with his friends. I wanted to be with him, and slowly I realized that I was, in the words of friend Al from Disney's Bambi, Twitter-pated. It was probably about a year into seeing each other before we started using the words dating and boyfriend. Our first official date was to see the Hunger Games. We went to a theater a few towns away from where we lived to minimize the risk of being seen together. I remember feeling so free sitting there in the dark theater, being together. For those 2 hours and 22 minutes, I was able to push the heaviness away. But I knew our date, and eventually our relationship, was going to have to end. Time went on, and we kept secretly dating. He actually tried to break up with me after 2 years, because knowing his future, he didn't want to break my heart. I told him I knew the deal when we got together, and I'd rather have him for 5 years of wonderful than not at all. So we stayed together. We laughed. We went on more movie dates. He told his roommate that he was going to visit family in Virginia during holiday breaks when he was really spending the week with me a town away. We FaceTimed when his roommate was out. I picked him up and dropped him off at secret spots when we had plans to see each other. We agreed that before he graduated and moved back to India, we would take a trip together to Disney World as our last goodbye, because I wanted to be in my favorite place with my favorite person. All these times together, all these plans, and all the while, I was falling more and more in love. I knew I wanted to be with him. I secretly hoped before he graduated he wanted to come out and be with me, but I didn't pressure him. I loved him, and I whispered silent prayers for our future. One evening we were laying in bed cuddling, and Someone Like You by Adele came on the radio. Don't forget me, I beg. I remember you said, sometimes it lasts in love, but sometimes it hurts instead. We both got very quiet. The room felt heavy, and the sadness was palpable. It had been 4 years of laughter and love, and knowing that soon it would be over. He broke the silence. I just wish we could say fuck it and come out to our families and be together. My heart leaped. Just say the word and I will. He was quiet for what felt like an eternity, then said, okay. He said, okay. My heart raced. My mind raced. Oh my God, he said, okay. Oh my God, he said, okay. That means I have to tell people. I decided to tell my friend Beck first. I knew she was safe and she loved me, and she was so happy when I told her. She gave me the courage to tell my baby sister that same night. Now I had 2 allies. I started to feel free. Then there was my best friend, Andy. He was the friend I was most worried about losing. We were in his car, and I nervously said I needed to tell him something. He said, "Whatever you're going to tell me, just know that I love you no matter what." That was all I needed. After I came out, he told me that he already knew. Turns out, most of my friends did. I was trying so hard to hide it, working my ass off to be straight, and they all knew. One by one, I told the rest of my friends. Most were overwhelmingly accepting. Some said they loved me, but they couldn't condone my lifestyle. So, no more leading worship, no more being part of the church leadership team. And then it was time to tell my family. Enter Mickey Mouse. There we were, my mom, my sister, and I sitting in the Beauty and Beast themed restaurant in the Magic Kingdom. It was beautiful, like we were actually dining in the ballroom in the castle. The air was filled with the smell of yummy food, including the gray stuff, which you should try, by the way. It's delicious. There was themed music playing and people happily chatting. All of a sudden, a straight couple seated behind us got engaged. People were cheering and clapping. My sister was crying. I looked at my mom and she said, "Oh, I wish you'd find someone. I just want you to be happy." "I am happy, Mom. What makes you think I'm not happy?" "I just want you to find someone." "Mom, I'm happy." And on it went. I looked at my sister and she gave me a look back like, "Is this happening? Is it time?" My eyes got wide and I signaled to her that no, it was definitely not happening. She went to the restroom. She came back and Mom was still talking about me finding someone and being happy. Suddenly, an urgency started brewing in my body. It felt like I was going to explode. I look at my sister again and her eyes got wide. She knew it was about to happen. "Mom, do you know about me?" She asked what I meant. "Do you know about me?" "Know what?" she said. Then the words that changed my life forever tumbled out of my mouth. That I'm gay. It was done. I was out. I was finally out. Sort of. "Really?" she asked. "Yes." She looked at my sister and asked, "Really?" My sister said, "Yeah, Mom, really." The next wave of urgency swept across me, and the floodgates opened. "And I've been dating someone for 4 years, and he's from India, and he's Hindu, and we want to get married." Now I was out. It was all out on the table. Granted, it was a beautifully decorated table in a beautifully decorated dining room with the beautiful, imposing beast greeting guests in the next room in the most magical place on earth. Trademark. My mom said something to the effect of, "Well, that's a lot of information." She got teary, and I said, "I wanted to tell you, but I was afraid you'd be disappointed in me." I started crying. "Why would I be disappointed in you? I love you." I felt the weight lifting. The conversation continued throughout the day and into the rest of the week that we spent together in the same condo on this family vacation. After Disney, I told my dad. As hoped, he accepted me. Like my mom, he wasn't sure what it meant with his understanding of the Bible, but he loved me. Next, I told my other sister and brother, and they were fine. Part of the, "Yeah, we know, we figured you'd tell us someday" crowd. Each time I told someone, I felt more like myself. I'd like to say that I did it for me, but I don't think that's completely true. At first, I did it for him, for us. I knew I'd found the man I wanted to share my life with, and I did not want to lose him. I don't know if I would have ever come out if it wasn't for Harish. His love was the thing that helped me unlock the closet door. Harish told his roommate first, and we became friends. That opened a whole new world of spending weekends at their apartment and being free together. He then took a cue from me and told his sister, and she was supportive for a day. Then she outed him to his parents. They called the next morning while I was at his apartment. It was definitely not magical. It was yelling and crying, talking, pleading, and reasoning in another language, with a bit of English mixed in, while his roommate told me snippets of what was being said. It was rough. But time has a way of smoothing things over, and after about a year of getting to know me, they loved and accepted me. We've now visited them in India twice, and this past summer, they came here and stayed with us for 3 wonderful months. Oh, and that trip to Disney World? Harish and I took it together to celebrate our engagement. And in February, we celebrated our 8th wedding anniversary by going back. One of my favorite Disney songs encourages listeners to reach out and find your happily ever after. I'm so glad I did. Thank you.
Our next storyteller reminds us that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is leave. With her story, Flight Path, please welcome Melissa Madsen.
My mom said jump, and I jumped. I didn't ask how high, because I was supposed to know already. Obey, walk on eggshells, and don't bleed. Stay quiet. There is an unrepaired fist-sized hole in my bedroom wall from when she threw a hammer when she was mad. That visible reminder was enough to keep me under my mom's control well into adulthood. When I was 26, I decided I was no longer going to let my fear of my mom control me. On February 1st, 2005, I hopped on a plane from Sunset, PA, a small town my family founded, and flew across the country to Phoenix, Arizona. I met Lisa on a Woman Loving Women message board in 2004. She was 16 years my senior. We talked on the phone late into the night. She asked me to send her a photo, so I did. Never got one back. She said we were soulmates. I wanted to believe her. But also, if it didn't work, no biggie, she was my rescuer. I was scared. I didn't know what lay ahead. But I was excited to live my life the way I wanted. Each seat on the plane had its own TV. I could watch anything in their library. Instead, I watched the flight path and wrote in my diary how long the flight would take. 4 hours and 43 minutes. The tiny plane on the screen moved further and further and further away from everything I had ever known. It was 66, I was finally an adult. I felt free. I was out on my own, doing my own thing. It was 66 degrees when I landed in Phoenix, a stark contrast to the cold I left behind. Lisa picked me up with her friend Richard, who carried the 2 bags with everything I deemed necessary to start a new life. Some clothes, my flute, my pool cue, and Nighty Night, a small stuffed bunny I had my whole life. I was ready for this new beginning. 2 months and 5 days later, I found myself back in my old bedroom, staring at that hammer hole, wondering what the hell happened. My time with Lisa shook me to my feminist core, and it made me question who I am. It somehow managed to be both the best and worst experience of my life up to that point. I have a strong sense of self. I know who I am, and I'm confident in that. I have a degree in women's studies. I am well versed in the power and control wheel. I was not well versed in the BDSM community that Lisa was a part of. I was well aware Lisa was part of this community before I moved. I wasn't opposed to it. However, it blurred the lines of consent and choice. I started to wonder, did I really want this? Or was this just a way out from under my mom's control? It wasn't the physical aspect of it that made me question my own motives. It was the emotional and mental boundaries that got messy. Lisa could be gentle and caring. She said she cared about me, and she did the little things to show she cared. But then she would insult and control what I could do or wear or eat. That's what confused me. She was always explaining the dominant and submissive relationship. I understood it. I just didn't understand when she was talking to me as a dom to her sub or as a friend. I was sure it was abuse. But I was starting a new life, and I wanted to succeed as an adult. Ultimately, I realized she had the same narcissistic tendencies as my mom. What the hell did I get myself into? I also felt like I was compromising my feminism values. I was sure there was a way feminism and BDSM could work in tandem, but I couldn't figure it out. I felt like I was a bad feminist for enjoying some aspects of it and not standing up against what felt wrong. What had I actually consented to of my own free will? What was manipulated out of me? What was just to survive? And if I only did it to survive, was it still consensual? There is so much to unpack that I'm still unpacking it 21 years later. I quickly realized that Lisa wasn't my soulmate or feminist. I originally had intended to stay in Phoenix, but fate had other plans, and I found myself on a plane and then a bus heading back to Sunset in a literal flood. Back to the room with the hole in the wall, back to my mom. My 2 months in Phoenix changed me, and it did change the dynamics of the relationship with my mom for the better. I wasn't as scared to live my life on my terms anymore, and eventually I met the person who would become my spouse. On March 25th, 2012, I got married at the legendary Seawall Belmont House, home to the National Women's Party, where the fight for women's suffrage was won. Or a little bit, was the most epic celebration of feminism ever. We are both feminists. We're on equal footing with each other in every way. My spouse Beckett even has the symbol for women with the word feminist tattooed on their arm. Not only did we get married in the most feminist place on the planet, but we also got married in front of Susan B. Anthony's desk on Gloria Steinem's birthday during Women's History Month. The elopement was epic, but sadly, the marriage didn't last. Divorce sucks, but we went into the marriage with shared values and on equal footing. So I'm proud to say we were able to exit it the same way. We chose to be fabulous co-parents. We are feminists. We are raising a feminist child. We met because of feminism, and that's how we both became and remain a family. We have been divorced for 9 years. For the first few years, we would still text each other happy anniversary. Ultimately, we don't want a wedding day to be diminished for our son, because it was a happy day for us, and he deserves to know that at one point, his parents were happy together, even if we're happier apart. And hello, our wedding elopement was epic. We are who we are and have the rights we have because that place existed. We want to remember that and celebrate the child that came out of our marriage. I have come a long way since I questioned who I am as a feminist. It's easy to say that feminism is the equality of the sexes, but at its heart, it's really about choice. The choice to leave a relationship in search of something better. The choice to return to a relationship on your terms. The choice to make the world a better place and to raise others to do the same. Thank you.
Up next, we have a storyteller who deftly explores that blended line between where friendship ends and something more begins. With his story, Rock Show Blues, please give a warm welcome to Jason Coots.
At our best, Maggie and I made each other laugh. We could talk about matters meaningful. She was there for me at the funeral of a dear friend who had succumbed to addiction. I was with her at the funeral of her father. I fainted one time in her presence while digesting a few tacos from earlier in the day. She made a short scream, "Ah!" as I fell at her and collided with the wall. Another time we were walking into the night, laughing. We walked railroad tracks, sharing cigar puffs. I took a hit from a flask of scotch and declared it to be magical, a gesture to a writer whose work we both enjoy. We were walking in the direction of my workplace at the time, a call center. I said, "Hey, let's go in with my badge. We'll catch the night shift." This was a terrible idea. I greeted the night shift, reeking of cigar and booze. Maggie and I met when I lived in the rural town and she in the city. When I came back to the city, she had moved to a bigger city, sort of close by. Then she moved to a different state, but it was one neighboring my home state. She joined me for family Christmases while she was living there. Then, at last, after years being friends across distances, she moved back. And now we are both in the city where we first met. We each have an apartment downtown. The proverbial world oyster is in front of us. The next thing I know, I'm at a rock show, looking over my shoulder for Maggie. As I understand it, she's planning to be here with two of her friends. I am here with one of my buds. We just came from a restaurant where I had requested seating for 5. Maggie never said she could meet before the show. In my head, though, I expected her to be there. So here's me and my bud getting knocked around by aging rockers at the show. I give up looking over my shoulder, and Maggie never arrives anyway. Late in the morning, she reaches out to see if I will meet her and her pals for brunch. I'm resentful, so I say, forget it. Why was I ghosted? She's offended that I would consider her unreliable, and something explodes. We are in our first argument despite our years as friends. Maggie had been at my 40th birthday celebration in a big city. She joined us for a soccer game one night and soup dumplings the next. At the game, we started laughing and dancing when we discovered ourselves on the Jumbotron. Before dumplings the next evening, she gifted me with a pocket watch painted with the Holy Mother. Another time, we went camping with her family and shared a two-person tent. Lightning cracked shortly after we were asleep. Bam! I popped up like a vampire and for some reason yanked the blanket away from Maggie. She screamed, "Ah!" A downpour started. The little tent kept the water out. Some nearby campers were not so lucky. When the storm and wind let up, Maggie's dad came around with a flashlight to see if everyone was okay. We said, "Yeah, we're okay." Then Maggie said, "Dad, yeah? Can you move that flashlight away?" Soon we were asleep again. I was on my side in the night when I opened my eyes to see Maggie facing me. Lips puckered. Her eyes popped open to see me staring at her. She gasped and flipped to her other side quickly. Dismissing this as something strange in the night, I guess, I turned over too and was soon back asleep. In the morning, her brother asked, "Where's Maggie?" I said, "I don't know." She was away many minutes before returning to the group, distanced and evasive. This arguing after the rock show is new for us. I'm mad, she's mad because I'm mad. Can anything be done? A mutual friend has arranged a meeting for us at a faux German restaurant called The Worst. That's true. We get a chance to each clear the air, and we're in better spirits, largely with thanks to the beer on hand. By midweek of the week following, I am mad again and resentful, and she is too. Our very first time hanging out without other friends around was for a rural town bar crawl. We courageously patronized each of the 3 bars in the small town. We were flying high when the bartender at the final bar tricked us into getting sour apple shots. It was a trick. Maybe he had his own resentments through which to work. We walked through the quiet town, back to the house, laughing in the night. At the house, I flipped a pizza to the floor while pulling it from the oven. I remember lying in the living room, looking over to the room Maggie was in. The door was closed. We were both sick the next morning, and she returned early instead of staying for pancakes as planned. back to post-show reconciling. We are meeting again, this time without beer or a mediator. We are walking and chatting in a park downtown, and then we park on a bench to continue talking. Maggie is sharing with me how she came alive while spending time with her two friends before the show. And the feeling only grew as they meandered around together. One of the friends was her ex-husband. She's sharing how the innocence of their time that evening brought her back to herself and their best times together. It was important to her. And this is the reason she missed the rock show. I realize I have been seeing one side of the whole thing, so I apologize. She apologizes to me, too. We did it. Back to normal. Back to the reckless good times. We make plans to attend another rock show, one in the nearby big city this time. At a different time in our friendship, when she was living in that same city, she treated me to a scrumptious sit-down meal at a Greek restaurant. I wish I could remember the name. I had moussaka, and we shared a shot of chilled ouzo. The Redemption Rock Show is a fun time. We are dancing and singing to almost every song. We have been dancing so much, someone nearby chimes in, "Okay, still going." But will this be our peak as friends? We are traveling back the next day, and she is passing me on the interstate. She is flying by, mouth moving, talking with someone, and she doesn't see me. Well, we have planned another excursion. After a museum or a walk, we're at a coffee house, chatting about various topics, feeling the old groove. Then Maggie asks if I would mind talking some more about our detonation from a couple months ago. Naively thinking I have a choice, I say no thanks. Since that day, we have exchanged a few messages, each describing good friendship and sharing how much we care. It is an odd, lengthy battle of words, agreeing while arguing, arguing while agreeing, as somewhere the volume of a favorite song playing is being turned down, down. Thank you.
Our next storyteller made me believe that every pivotal moment of our lives already has a soundtrack. We just have to listen for it. With her story, Shades of Death, please give a warm welcome to Angeli Mullenix.
Hey Brian, do you remember that Japanese rock band you urged me to listen to? Yeah, that's the one, Duran Gray. I still listen to them. But I don't think I ever told you that CD you gave me saved me. It felt like salvation, forcing me to face those buried emotions. It's the church I came to when I needed something to believe in. someone who could be there for me and keep me company. Brian, you gave me a part of myself I didn't even know existed. When I heard this singer, I could hear myself, and that terrified me. No one would listen to me and my family. I always minded everyone else. Closeness, that felt more real watching Lost in Space. At least they had the robot warning them, danger, Will Robinson. In my house, danger was silence. Dad had everything behind humor. Mom and Dad spoke in circles. Nothing direct, nothing honest. And when it was direct, it sounded like being called the round one or screamer by my dad. I didn't know how to exist without feeling guilty for taking up space. Emotions, not safe. Body, not safe. So I filled my body with food to cope. My voice taken from me early, too young to say what was wrong. Outside the house, it wasn't much different. Too loud, then too quiet. Too fat with eyes too ugly. Picked apart for how I looked like I was some alien. Imagine a cute, plump 10-year-old. Long, dark brown hair, purple velvet pants, horse obsessed, talks to the animals and fairies on occasion. Even when I tried to be normal, something about me was too big to fit in. I hated music until I heard Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata playing in class. I felt the music moving in me, something alive and waiting. But by 13, the only safety I had was writing poetry, drawing anime, and listening to the Inuyasha soundtrack on repeat. One day, I'm on the phone talking with my friend Randa, looking at the four walls, despising the world and those preppy girls at school. All of a sudden, I hear my mom wailing and a bang on the wall. I rush into the room and see, but all I hear is, "Your brother's dead." I didn't even know or understand what my mom was saying. Apparently, he took a gun into a bathroom stall in the army base, stationed in Germany. I couldn't help but feel the miles between us. 21 years old, about to get a promotion. We weren't close by any means, but suddenly there was this empty space in the world where he used to be. Joshua's death just pissed me off even more. I wanted everything to fucking burn. So we packed up, we moved to a new place, Chambersburg. I made a friend, CJ. He invited me to hang out with him and his posse. So I met Rosie, McKay, and you, Brian. You were a solid brother to me. Me and Miss CJ McKay would walk the town, then we'd kick it back at your place. That small, cozy living room with a lazy boy chair and couch. That's our spot. Our schedule was crazy. Listen to music, watch music videos, eat Rosie's food, French fries covered with brown gravy and hamburger meat. But one evening you put on a CD for me. You knew I was into foreign music. The first thing I heard, wind blowing, footsteps climbing stairs, running tap water, a TV being shut off. Then, this small, insane-looking man with a long black faux hawk covering his face, dark, smoky eyes staring right back, screaming into the mic like the world owed him lunch money. I'm intrigued. He's chanting the lyrics to this song. And the scenes are morphine, raging vocalists, lifeless bodies, trails of blood, and crawling cockroaches, like a scene from a B-rated horror film. You let me borrow that album, Withering to Death, and I listen to it pretty much every night, especially as I'm falling asleep. Then you just gave it to me, and I'm surprised because I didn't know how much I needed it. Keel, the lead singer, unpredictable, raw, driven. I found something in him I never found in anyone. Truth. Safety. He made me feel like somebody could speak my language. I didn't have to pretend I was okay. His songs, dark, heavy, raw, forced me to feel what I kept inside. In all that darkness, the only thing I could feel was one thing: hope. Something softened around my carefully built castle walls with a dragon guarding the gate. My heart opened, and for the first time, I started letting people into my kingdom. But freshman year of high school, we moved again. This time, though, it was a small town, West Texas, Sweetwater. The water was more like sweet tea on a 100-degree day with a rattlesnake hissing. For the first time, people started to notice me on a positive side. My neons and black trip pants, heavy makeup, spiky blonde and pink hair. The misfits at school started to follow me like I was their cult leader. Then come junior year, I got into a relationship with a boy who drove a '97 Honda Accord EX. That car was a little worn down, but a fun little adventure. At first, I thought the relationship would be the same, until the boy in the Accord slowly eroded my shine. How I dressed, my personality, my friends. By senior year, I was isolated, smaller, unrecognizable. I don't even remember the music I listened to, but I remember the feeling of being trapped in a web, feeling more alone than ever. After we broke up, I started to perk up again. But then came the white Chevy Silverado. Big truck, big presence, not a lick of honesty under that hood, under all that chrome. A grade A narcissist. It felt safe at first, like I was being carried somewhere steady. Somewhere along the way, the Silverado turned into a black Chevy Impala. Quieter, darker, more ordinary. Darren Gray had another tour in 2015, and my Impala was gonna take me as a birthday present. I was pumped. Last time I saw them, I was a sophomore in high school, and I could barely remember what happened, other than me losing my favorite red scarf and those neon pink leggings I wore against a sea of black t-shirts. The weekend before the concert, there was a problem. It was going to be hard for the Impala to go to work the next day after the concert. Instead of fighting for it, I gave it up. I told myself it was fine, but really, I was giving up another piece of myself. Instead of Dallas, we drove to Abilene to see my friend. I needed somebody who knew me, the girl I was, random, rebellious, unfiltered. I hoped I could relive those parts taken from me, the ones I was so willing to give away for love. The Impala, notorious in our small town, mostly with the ladies. Here I thought, I'm crazy for years, getting into constant fights over his girl cousin, who was a little too close to him. She's like how you used to be. The only thing I remember from those nights still rings in my head. Used to be, used to be, used to be. Then the silence he weaponized. Well, that was sharp as a knife. I only had myself to blame. No matter what I did, I'm always doing something wrong. My words, my actions, my looks, just a royal fuck up. By our 6th year together, it wasn't an Impala anymore. It was a Dodge Challenger. Louder lies, bigger ego. During those Challenger years, a French band called Kyo kept me going. Same name as Duran Gray's singer. His influence just kept finding me, strangely enough, when I was in danger of losing myself completely to this madness. Eventually, the Dodge burned itself out. The truth came out. By 2020, that Challenger was in the junkyard for good. So, I moved back to Pennsylvania, back to familiar roads, familiar air, familiar silence. That's where I met Steady, a silver '07 Honda Accord, safe, dependable, can go the extra mile. We shared something heavy. Both of us had brothers in the military who took their own lives. And for a while, that safety felt enough until I did something unexpected. I went to Brazil, deep into the Amazon rainforest, to learn from the Yawanawa tribe. 2 of their shamans sang, "Oh, wana shamana, oh, wana shamana, oh, wana shamana." Voices were alive, moving inside you, not just sound, but something ancient. And I took those songs back with me to Rio, where I met back up with the silver Accord. On paper, perfect. But I couldn't tune out how the relationship weighed on me. Reality starting to cage me 2.5 years in. I felt small. I couldn't breathe, and I realized something. Being safe is not the same as being alive. So I parked the silver Honda and I left. Freedom being that open road with the big blue sky waiting, and I didn't look back. Music cracked me open, exposed my anxiety, my loneliness, and my rage. So I chose my fear. I chose the weight of my words. I chose the space I deserve to be in. Songs rewrote my messy life, shaped into something stronger, more daring, more durable. For most of my life, I was told to shut up, be smaller, be quiet, be someone consumable. So, Brian, when you gave me that city, you didn't just give me a band. You gave me a place to belong, somewhere to put everything I wasn't allowed to be. When family couldn't hear me, when relationships shrank me, when my own voice was buried under years of never being enough. It wasn't a person who held me. It was sound, a song, that could carry the weight my body couldn't. And Keo, he didn't give me a voice. He gave me permission to feel the one I was hiding. And now, after everything, I'm not coming home to a person. I'm coming home to the voice that was waiting for me to be big enough to hold it. Thank you.
Up next, we have a storyteller who thought she knew exactly who she was, until a tiny, magnificent, unstoppable human arrived and blew the walls right off her quiet world. With her story, Life's Navigator, please welcome Amanda Moore.
I was sitting backstage in this very theater back in December 2024 during a production of A Steampunk Christmas Carol, when I saw my oldest daughter, Abby, walking through the cast and crew. I looked down at myself and just took 3 deep breaths. I was feeling pretty introverted and really anxious at that moment. And as I looked up, Abby was there. Mom, 2 minutes to places. I nodded and then tried to sit in my assigned seat. I can't sit. I just started pacing back and forth and back and forth. And I'm looking around, trying to focus on something else, anything else. And I stopped and I looked. And I saw my youngest daughter, Catherine, who we all called Kat. She was sitting next to her best friend. They were just sitting there, quietly giggling to each other with not a single solitary care in the world. They were snacking on the green grapes they had been given them. As I watched them, I realized Kat was the reason why I was here. Kat was why I decided to audition and why I thought I had a chance at actually doing this. She was the one that had convinced me to try something that was way outside of my comfort zone. And now I was standing in the wings because of her. When I found out I was pregnant with her, my life was actually the complete opposite of where I am now. I was a stay-at-home mom. I had 2 amazing kids, but not really any good friends. You know, those friends that you find a funny meme and you just want to send it to them and, oh, it's midnight, but I have to share this. I didn't have any of those. I had also just suffered a miscarriage. And being pregnant again, I wanted to be excited for this baby, but what if? What if? After Kat was born, she really started changing the family dynamic. From a really young age, she was so incredibly extroverted that it made me uncomfortable. She was completely fine walking up to strangers at the gas station or in line at the deli and having a full-blown conversation. As she grew older, she ended up just steamrolling people with the force of her personality and ended up collecting friends like other kids were collecting shiny, pretty rocks. One of these friends that she collected was her best friend, Liv. They met in kindergarten, where I can only imagine the interaction started with Kat walking up to Livy and saying, "Hi, my name is Catherine and we're gonna be best friends now." She and Livy became inseparable, and after about 2 months of them at school together, I got a Facebook message asking, "Can Kat come for a play date? And would you like to come and have some coffee too?" I didn't answer right away. I did want to be social, but I considered myself pretty socially awkward and I was weird. But Kat wanted to go, so I committed to an hour. I could fake being social for an hour. At that play date, I had the opportunity of meeting the person that became one of my best friends, Livy's mom, Tara. She became the person that I could send those memes to at midnight, or would be there for coffee or conversation just when things were starting to weigh on me. Coming back to that moment backstage, still pacing a little bit, I looked around and I saw the actors. They were getting up and they were in places. They were ready to start the show. I was still anxious, but was able to smile at Tara as she was waiting in the wings to make her grand entrance as Jacob Marley. I was so damn happy and proud to be friends with such an amazing person. And I realized I never would have met her if Kat hadn't forced her friendship on Livy and decided to have a playdate. Seeing Kat and Livy giggling as they sat, heads together, sharing secrets while the rest of the show just hurried around them, I realized she was how I got here. Not just with my friendship, but also how I got to be part of the theater and part of Players on High. It was because of Kat's ambition to be on stage. In 2021, a friend had reached out to me asking if my kids were interested in auditioning for a steampunk Christmas carol. I said I would ask, and I went to Kat and I asked, I said, Kat, do you want to, before I could even finish the question, it was, yes. What's my costume gonna look like? Do I get to wear makeup? Am I gonna have any lines? Where do I have to go? When does it start? We did end up going through the entire audition process, and she was cast as Tiny Tim. She had a line. She fell really hard for acting and wanted to be at the theater all the time. Since I could sew and do basic alterations, and I was here anyways with Kat, I offered to help with the costume team. Coming to the theater was like going to a friend's house. It became my happy place, a safe space with new friends who shared a love of the performing arts, and there were so many people who were willing to mentor my kid in her newest obsession. At the end of the show, I really felt I needed to stay involved. I started volunteering at the theater, and then after a little while, I became part of the part-time flex staff. As time went on, I was offered a part-time office position here at the theater, and after about 6-8 months, I was offered the box office lead position. Fast forward another year, I am now the house manager here at the Carlisle Theater in a job that I absolutely love, but totally not where I would have seen myself even 5 years ago. Moving forward, continue to help with the theater shows and watching Kat and the rest of the family on stage. We came to the 4th annual Steampunk Christmas Carol. Yes, we did it every year. I saw the auditions posted. I went to Kat and I said, Kat, would you like to audition? And before I could say audition, again, it was yes, where do I show up? Do you think I'll have more lines this year? And do I get to wear a prettier costume? I jokingly at that point said to Kat, maybe I should audition. You guys make it look like it's pretty fun. Her response was, Mom, you have to do this. Then we can all be on stage together. I said, I'll think about it. In the back of my mind, no, I don't think I could ever get on stage in front of that many people and actually do that. Over the next couple of days, at random times, usually at bedtime or when it was time to get hairbrushed or anything Kat didn't want to do, she'd bring up the topic again. Mom, are you going to audition? I'm thinking about it, babe. Mom, are you going to audition? She promised to run lines with me if I got a speaking role. She convinced me to audition. Well, it's more like she wore me down. I didn't feel like I was fully prepared to do it, but I did. I was proud that I got up there and I took the chance at doing something I was not comfortable with, but I wasn't expecting to be cast. There was no way. It was not going to happen. I was shocked 3 days later when I got the email offering me the role of Mrs. Cratchit, the role that I have always loved. It is my favorite role in that show, but I never thought I would be good enough or brave enough to try. Coming back to that moment backstage, feeling more settled, I started reflecting on my thoughts from earlier. reflecting at all the times that Kat had been there with me by my side when I was at a major turning point in my life. From career changes to new, deep, lasting friendships, to pushing myself outside of my comfort zone to do something I had always wanted. Kat was there at the first step, bringing new opportunities that I didn't have the determination or realization to reach for without her being there to encourage me on my way. Parents will always say that they love their kids and that they wouldn't be where they are without them. I never quite actually 100% believed that. I mean, I love my kids, but I was in charge of how my life was going and where the path was going. Thank you very much. My older two kids certainly helped shape who I considered myself to be, but Kat certainly had the unique ability to know which opportunities I needed to take advantage of at the perfect time for me to be more fulfilled and more happy, all while she was just living her best life and making the same connections in hers. She ended up dragging all of us along with her in her pursuit of her extracurriculars. But because of her, we have all lived a richer and more full life. Thank you.
And for our last storyteller this evening, the man who walked into our little room, the workshop called The Collective, and without even trying, became the heartbeat of this whole group. With his story, Thanks Mom, please welcome Ed Burns.
Oh, there we go. I remember the first time I made a room full of people laugh. I was a linebacker about to give a speech at a high school football banquet. Because I'd been to a banquet every year I played, I knew that, with the exception of one or two, all the speeches were about the same. So I asked my parents for advice to help me to stand out from the others. My mom basically echoed my thoughts, that the speeches were all the same. They thanked their coaches and teammates. They thanked their dads for playing catch with them. Some guys even thanked the marching band. But Mom said, no one ever thanks their mother. And if I wanted to be different, that's what I should do. The night of the banquet, I was more nervous than a peanut farmer during squirrel season. So I could feel the weight of everyone's stare silently judging me. I stammered through a shaky hello and then said, I'd like to begin tonight by thanking my mom, because she told me I had to. The audience laughed. I don't remember the rest of my speech, and to be honest, I don't remember any particular football play, but I do remember the room laughing, and I'll never forget how that made me feel. I felt funny. I felt like I was on top of the world. I felt like king shit of Turd Island. I had been introduced to the metaphorical dragon, only I didn't start chasing the comedic dragon just yet. You see, in all my circles, my friends, my family, even my coworkers, I'm the quiet one. In fact, I would even say that I don't like talking. I grew up with a speech impediment where I had difficulty saying certain letter combinations. It's something that most kids grow out of, but I never did. I even had to take speech classes all through school. It's not that I never talked, it's just that when I did, it was short and to the point. I was never a fan of small talk. One time, a small group of students was in an after-school shop class where we made wooden toy trains that we donated to Toys for Tots. We dropped the trains off at a toy drive, and the news was there. They wanted to do a live cut-to of the class and ask us a couple questions. The reporter was briefing us before the interview, basically saying what was going to happen. But one thing he did say was that we should answer questions with a complete thought, not just a simple answer. He asked all the easy questions, like, where are we from, what do we make, those type of things. Each time he asked, a different student answered. One kid answered something that it was cool that we got to donate toys to kids that didn't have any. Then all of a sudden, he looks right at me and asks, "And how did that make you feel?" Pointed the mic right at my face. I knew this was my time to crush it. Speech impediment be damned, here I go. Speak clearly and don't mumble, I thought, and confidently I replied, "Good." The reporter said some other stuff which I didn't hear because I was on one of those acting highs they talk about. Afterwards, though, the rest of the group was teasing me because apparently I did exactly what the reporter told us not to do. But in my mind, I answered the question he asked. If he would have asked a better question, I would have given a better answer. He should have been better at his job. He was certainly no Janelle Stelson. After high school, my life took a slightly more serious turn when I decided to join the Army. Little did I know, however, that August of 2001 was a terrible time to join the Army. I pretty much stayed the quiet one, though, and I like to think I adapted a more modern technique of Teddy Roosevelt saying, "Speak softly and carry a big stick." Or as millennials might remember, Lil Wayne saying, "Real G's move in silence like lasagna." At this point in my life, I still didn't think of myself as funny, until one day Sergeant Kinney was talking about me to some other people. He said, "I like Ed." Actually, he called me Burns because that was my name in the Army. But he said I like Burns. He never talks, but when he does, he always says something funny. I'm pretty sure he was the first person to tell me I was funny. Sergeant Kinney was killed in action on January 27, 2004. I like to think he's still laughing at the things I say, and maybe even one day he can catch me do 5 minutes in Valhalla. I left the Army, and I got a good job that I enjoyed, and was well on my way to doing all the things you're supposed to do. Only, I got stuck in a rut and was unable to switch to four-wheel drive to get out. Until the COVID pandemic happened. While I was staying healthy at home, I dove into Netflix. I basically watched every stand-up comedy special they had. Most were great, some were bad. I'm not gonna name names, but they know who they are. The bad ones got me thinking though, I'm funnier than this. So I got a notebook to start writing jokes. Ultimately, I had no clue what I was doing and couldn't come up with anything. So I Googled, how do I be funny? Two or three results down the page was an ad for an improv theater in Harrisburg. As I was checking out the website, I came across a test that could determine if improv was right for me. I was nervous to take an exam for the first time in 20 years, but I answered the questions to the best of my ability. Even though I didn't study, luck was on my side. As the test results came back, the improv was right for me, and that I should sign up for an intro to improv class. Other than Wayne Brady, I didn't know anything about improv, but who am I to argue with test results? Luck was on my side once again, as there's an intro to improv class starting soon. I saw the ad at the absolute perfect time. I signed up and started class the very next Wednesday. After just one class, I fell in love. I was nervous at first because I thought I might be too old or too weird. And to be honest, being on stage in front of people terrifies me. In fact, I was more comfortable on the front line in 2 different wars than I am on stage. But my fears were quickly relieved. In fact, at 40 years old, I was one of the younger people in the class. I may have been the weirdest one, but nobody cared. For 8 weeks, I looked forward to Wednesday so I could go to improv class. I still don't like being on stage, but hearing people laugh at something I said is the best drug I've ever done. After the class was over, I began actively chasing that dragon. I took all 3 levels of classes the theater has to offer, and I took 2 levels of musical improv, where we literally perform a completely improvised musical from start to end. And I also learned the proper use of jazz hands. If you think talking on stage is hard, try singing. I did it though, and I came back for more. At this point, I caught up to the dragon, and I was able to hitch a ride all the way to Chicago, the home of improv, where I studied at the I.O. Theater, whose alumni include Chris Farley, Tina Fey, Jason Sudeikis, and myself. I currently perform multiple times a month as part of the hit improv team Ham Juice, the Harrisburg area's premier meat-flavored beverage. And I've even made it to the point where new dragon chasers ask me for words of wisdom. I always give them the same advice I got at the beginning. Make sure to thank your mother. Thanks, Mom.